We're going to go to a Q&A discussion session now. I think you can see there's passion here, and I'd also say there's certainly leadership here in terms of what's gone on. And I've got a couple of questions that were prompted by what you folks said. But before I do, I'd like to introduce Marcus Bachmann, who his firm is mentioned. He is the U.S. president of Codesys. And Marcus, I'd just like to get you maybe to give a little bit of a software supplier perspective on this journey, if you could do so briefly. I think everyone knows about Codesys.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I can certainly give you a quick perspective on how that looks like from a software side. I mean, we're playing in both OPA's world, in the process automation as well, in the factory automation. So we've been working with both of those applications and the different challenges that they presented to us, from both on the IT side, because or specifically myself, I'm an electrical engineer, so the whole thing about virtualization is something that I just had to get used to. It's not something that you learn or that I learned in high school or later in college. It's something that's you gotta embrace it, and it's gotta let it sink in and work through all the opportunities that it presents, as well as all the challenges. Same for me, it's the same paradigm going from wired communication to wireless communication, or from writing a letter to sending emails. It's something that is just, you're doing the same communication, you're just doing it a little different, and all of a sudden you have such a large amount of new opportunities in just by taking advantage of what the technology can provide. And I see the same happening right now with the control systems and virtualization, bringing to the factory floor or to a process plant. And we are still in the early stages here of embracing the technology, and I really appreciate all the work that Exxon's been doing and Audi on spearheading the actual applications on those opportunities. And taking that technology and showing, yes, it works, and now looking ahead and seeing, okay, now we've actually proven that what we can do, what we could do before, just better. Now we can actually take a look at what else can we do with that technology. So that's the exciting part for us as a software vendor, working with you guys on the applications and see, okay, what can we provide from a software side to support that? What new technology do we need to embrace in our software development, in our processes, cybersecurity, and all the additional challenges that are coming at us as a software manufacturer to provide software for this kind of application.
Hey, thank you. I have a couple questions I just gotta ask, I'm sorry. But what I took away, one thing that really struck me with what you talked about is you talked about cost takeout through standards. And I just wanted to, I realized you had that situation. We had big figures to talk about and hundreds of systems to replace over a short period of time. But what about the balance of cost takeout versus innovation? Because what Henning said was, now we've come to the point where we add an application into our infrastructure if we need it. And you're kind of that way with your Lighthouse project. So how do you balance in your evaluations? You had a situation where you had a lot of cost in front of you, but how do you internally look at the cost takeout versus innovation capability?
Yeah, I think that's, thanks for the question. It's very simple. We want both.
We know you want both, but it's hard to evaluate the innovation capability at this point. Like Henning said, you don't know what you're going to need in 2027.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So yes, so it's much easier to focus on costs. Like, we're very good at looking at how much things cost. Dave is nodding his head. We work that to death. The value side is sometimes where we struggle. And so there are cases where we can come up with, hey, I've got a firm value case here, it's worth this much. A lot of times, and particularly when we're talking about new tech, it's like, I can use this to do this thing, but I know that I can use it to do a lot more, but we just haven't spent the time to quantify that. And in some cases, it's not immediately obvious. So it's one of those things that, hey, we're gonna learn as we go, but let's capture the value now, right? So I have to have enough to justify, like, hey, we're gonna spend some money, we're gonna get this kind of return on this, and that's gonna position us a little bit further down the road, right? It's a foggy road, that the headlights only go out so far, but we gotta get down that road to see where there's future value opportunities. So that's how we look at it. There's what you can put your hands on now, but hopefully we know it's driving us in the right direction, and there's a lot more value out there.
Okay. And Henning, the question that on my mind about what you said, you decided to virtualize the PLCs, even though you have a large number of them. The case for virtualization of those HMIs is pretty straightforward. You mentioned it's much more difficult to technically virtualize the PLCs. Why? Tell me, you decided to centralize those in a server instead of your alternative would have been to put a bunch of other IPCs in place of the PLCs and just run something there. Can you tell us about the decision process, how that went, and what made you take the choices you did?
Well, maybe first I want to add what Whit said.
Okay.
We are doing this project because it is saving costs. And yes, the biggest cost saving is getting rid of the IPCs. On the PLC side, we would have just been looking at the PLCs, the cost savings would probably not have been big enough for us to take the risk of changing something so fundamental. So changing or virtualizing the PLCs was kind of like was driven in the shadow of the cost savings of virtualizing the IPCs. Now why virtualize the PLCs? And the answer to that is purely from a maintenance perspective. The problem that we were facing in the past is we hide all of that compute equipment in our automation cells behind firewalls. So if we need to do an update, the firewall won't let a centralized distribution system talk to all the IPCs because they're firewalled off. You can't connect to it. So you have to walk to every single PLC and do the connection bottom up to this server in order to do all the updates, or you take a thumb drive. So the question that we were trying to answer, looking at, hey, what do we need to do to be IT secure in the future, was how, from a maintenance perspective, will we be able to update all of our PLCs in 24 hours? And the answer is either with a lot of people, or we figure out something different. And so, starting with the VPLC being the spearhead into the automation cell, knowing that if we can do the PLC, we can do probably any other kind of equipment that we have in the automation cell and get updates using technologies that we know out of the data centers, and not the way we're used to do that from the automation side.
Got it.
And so that was a reason to do it, which does not make a business case, because how do you calculate cost for some kind of ransomware coming in and scrambling everything you have? That's a case that nobody ever wants to experience. So because you do not want to experience, you don't have costs for that. So there's no budget to do that, and so there's no budget that can be deducted. So from a financial point of view, There is no real business case in doing it, but from the maintenance point of view, there is a very big reason to do it. And now what we're still trying to figure out is how much maintenance effort do we actually save? But that's looking into a glass orb, and mine doesn't give me that number yet. So that's the experience that we'll have over time, figuring out how much easier will our maintenance be in the future now having this system. So we'll learn that, and yes, we'll find new caveats. We'll encounter problems that we didn't have before, and we'll have to work around that. But we strongly believe that this will help us. And again, it's a door opener for all the stuff that is to come.
Okay, appreciate it. I have one more question, and that is, maybe all of you can comment on this if you wish, but Whit made the point of, this is real, we want to push this technology out to other people. Well, Exxon has been working, or kind of sharing, not working, but sharing with a set of companies, some of them your peers, but mostly pretty large companies. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you see or what you would forecast for those other firms. I know that maybe isn't your role to forecast for other firms, but we'd like to have a lot of other firms here presenting. I'm sure you would too.
Absolutely.
So how's that been going? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so I think we are up to 10 collaboration partners that we've agreed to share our learnings in a non-competitive way. And so that remains, and I think that list is growing. So we're getting more traction. The fervency, if I can use that word, kind of varies across those 10. So some seem more active than others. And I think things change is what we've discovered is in companies who are championing OPA, it's typically a small cadre of folks within those companies. Mm-hmm. And as positions change or people retire, the landscape can change a little bit. And so that's the reality. So when you look across a group of 10, you're going to have some variability in terms of, okay, how are they going? How hard are they championing that within their own corporations, right? Because just like we heard, you got to justify everything that you're going to spend, right? And you really need to have that horsepower to take a chance to say, hey, we want to explore this too. We want to be the next to go. And so it's certainly my expectation that we're going to see several of the others over the next couple of years start to bring their lighthouse projects to the fore. So I am expecting that we're going to hear more of these success stories going forward. And it's just going to take time across that set of 10.
Okay, they're the large firms. Obviously, most of them are firms almost of your scale or larger sometimes. Okay, at this point, we have Alan in the back with microphones. I open this up to anyone who has a question from the floor. There's one over here, Alan. I certainly have a lot myself, and I'll keep asking, but Alan, go ahead and we'll take a question from the floor.
I'm Lucas, AB InBev. My question is to Whit. It's clear that the big opportunity we have to close the gap with the higher obsolescence that we have, right? You mentioned that. My question to you, in fact, there are two. One is, how do you see the challenge now moving forward with this migration effort to get there? And second, do you, for other industries outside yours, how do you understand which kind of barriers do you see we may have to get to get open automation there implemented?
Wow, that's a good question. Okay, let me speak to the one that I know a little bit more about. So obsolescence is a way of life for us in this industry. And that just is something that we're going to have to manage. Any time of obsolescence that you run across, you've got some decisions to make, and the decision about how you approach it is just going to be based on the economics of on what's on the ground, along with your vision of what type of value opportunity is there. So it's always going to be a cost to benefit discussion. That benefit may be something that's aspirational in addition to what you can get immediately. So similar to the discussion we had before, why should I invest in a technology? What's the benefit case? Sometimes that's blurry, and we're expecting that going along this path will open up other opportunities. So there's always going to be that discussion. If I have some obsolescence to manage, what's the best way to approach it? So there's no one size fits all. I mean, it'd be great to say, hey, everybody ought to cut over to an OPA solution as their incumbent DCS becomes obsolete. But that may not be the best case in all cases, right? It just depends on what's going on. What we would rather see, and that's part of the larger issue, when we're talking with the vendors, I think they're very keen to address the ask that we have to moving towards these standards, but they all kind of have the same issue. It's like, well, I have this huge installed base of my historical stuff, and I have to continue to take care of that. I want to be able to bring in some of these new capabilities, and so from a greenfield standpoint, that may make sense. Hey, here's our latest, greatest system. It's OPA conformant. Going forward, it's going to be great. But what about all the stuff in between, right? And so where there's a possibility to have a hybridized solution, to be able to bring on elements that are OPA, to manage expansions or to bring about some new capability that the incumbent DCS didn't necessarily have. We think that's a great step towards that direction, right? We're going to have the reality of systems that have been in the ground since the late 70s. Those are going to be there, hopefully not too much longer. But the ones in the 80s and the 90s will certainly be around for a long time. And so the degree at which they can be retrofitted in some way to help bring on some of these components, while that system evolves into this open and interoperable system, that's kind of what we're looking at. Your second question was, what about other industries and what kind of challenges do I see in them? That's a tough one because I'm not in those industries. I would probably look to my friend to the left here who is in a different industry and could probably speak better to that.
Yeah, maybe I can.
Marcus
as well,
works with a lot of different industries.
Because we're pretty much independent of a specific industry. We're a general purpose automation software provider. And we've been talking with many customers in many different industries about virtualized control systems and pretty much the same architecture with OPAS or with just general virtualization. One example of other industries where we see a lot of potential is, for example, power generation and the electric grid, all the critical infrastructure applications. So there's a big push into managing all the assets, like exactly what you've been doing too for long term. You need to maintain everything. You need to know what's running on what controller, and the best way to do it is virtualizing those and managing them centrally from a point where you have control over the assets without sending someone on the shop floor with a thumb drive. So all those critical infrastructures is one example in my eyes. Other industries probably depends on how diverse the assets are that are in the field right now and how much compute power is distributed all over the place, what can be consolidated. It's probably not a good solution for someone who just needs a PLC to drive one specific machine. But every larger scale application, I see a lot of potential.
And maybe a third point. We've been talking with a lot of our equipment suppliers, and they face the challenge that if we buy their equipment, we want software update for that hardware equipment for the next 30 years. So, and that equipment is built, and it's built at a certain point in time, a certain CPU is installed into it, a certain amount of memory is installed into it, a certain amount of storage is installed into it, and then all of a sudden, operating system updates come along. And they hog the entire memory, the CPU bandwidth, and the drive capacity. So what you're supposed to do? Well, you walk around, you install new hard drives, you upgrade the memory if possible, and so it's really hard for our suppliers to keep their installed base out in the field up to date, due to the restraints of the old hardware that is out there in the field. And now this virtualization gives the possibility to say, hey, okay, what do I really need on the shop floor? And one thing that comes to mind, motion control, you want microseconds in order to motion control really precise. Okay, that has to stay down there. But everything else in HMI, and most of the IT security glitches that we find are usually not at the very motion control part, but they are somewhere in the HMI, they're somewhere in the update system, they are somewhere in this higher software stack. Now, if you virtualize that, wouldn't that help our suppliers to do an easier case of maintaining their hardware? And then the answer is, well, yeah, but what do I do with customers who do not have this hyperconverged infrastructure? And the answer there is easy as well. Well, then you're installing an IPC into your cabinet anyhow. Then just, if needs be, replace that IPC. That's those customers that don't have that hyperconverged hardware will have to do it anyhow. But for all the others that have this hyperconverged infrastructure, all of a sudden, you can do updates to your equipment much easier, and you don't have to worry about, will this run on this old CPU? Secondly, if you figure out cool new features that your equipment is able to do, predictive maintenance, you name it, whatever, and we say, from a customer point of view, wow, this is a really cool feature. I would want that feature. Can I install it on my old hardware? And the answer is usually no. And so this is a way out of this dilemma, coping with old compute and old hardware on the shop floor. And so this idea fundamentally changes their business models. We are aware of that, but we think there's so much potential in doing it this new way that it's worth exploring it and going down that route.
Okay, appreciate that. I'm looking for a question out here.
Here up front.
Right down here up front.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, with that application, you didn't really mention the word OPAS.
That's true.
Yours that it's an open process automation compliant.
No.
It's not. And actually, that is one thing we're trying to figure out now, how to make public what we did, and how to get this in some kind of open standardization form. On my last slide, I wrote that the term that we're trying, or we're going to write a white paper on what we did, because we believe in what we did, and we want to what's not differentiating us from our competitors, share what we learned, because we think this is really going to transform the discrete automation industry. Now, the question that we have internally is, it's not process automation, so we're not using it wasn't a natural thing to adhere to OPAF standards there, but we're talking on, okay, what are the communication standards of the future, how to make this open, and then simply share what we've been doing so others can copy what we've done.
Let me follow up with a question on that. What about, you both work with some pretty prominent partners. What about having people develop some reference architectures with that? That's kind of an in-between step between having a standard and doing a project, or as you were doing in your test lab in the early days. So did you see any possibility for that, or is that, can you advance from a white paper to reference architectures? Because people like Cisco, companies like Cisco,
And
that's kind of their bread and butter many
right.
times.
And I mean, what we've been doing is that kind of like for our networking setup, that is now what Cisco calls, I'm forgetting the technical term, but it's one of where Cisco says, hey, if you set up the network like that, we guarantee that it will work. So it's maybe somebody can help me out here in the room.
We have Cisco.
It's not the software-defined access. It's a validated network set up by Cisco, where Cisco says, hey, if you do it this way, then it will work. Then
They
we'll
probably call it a reference architecture, or validated reference
Thank you.
architecture or something. Okay.
Yeah, so that's one thing. And on the virtualization side as well, VMware by Broadcom, it's now in their hypervisor. So if you get that, it will just do it. And the same thing with OpenShift on the Red Hat side for the containerized applications. It will simply, or it should work out of the box, and they will be able to support you with whatever you have there. So this was the very first step, and it was important to us to make it open and not to do something proprietary and closed, because hey, we want all of our suppliers to be able to go into this. We want our peers to follow the same path, because we strongly believe this is what we need to do in order to change the future of automation.
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it sounds like a very similar journey, and I think what's being demonstrated is it's a different way of thinking about how to solve a problem, right? We've come up with, again, decades of experience on solving a problem this way, and it gets very easy to have tunnel vision. I know, I've seen it. A lot of people still have it, and to be able to think out of the box and approach it in a novel way like that, and it's similar to how things have been addressed in different ways. I applaud Audi for approaching that. So I think that's great.
We have a question over there.
Yeah. So Mike Moody with BASF, and I guess it's probably more for Henning. So with this change you made, how have you transitioned your support personnel on the plant floors to be able to handle? They went from maybe working with directly PLCs and physical switches into all this virtual stuff, different skill sets. And then do those people, is it two distinct groups, or do they kind of cover the whole spectrum of knowing the process?
The question was on here. That's a good question. Okay, yeah.
Great question. I think the biggest challenge after tackling the technical challenges is exactly this transformation. How do we get our people on board? And the first answer to that question is, for a maintenance guy who programs a PLC, what does he do today? Today he takes his notebook and plugs it into the Ethernet junction box in the automation cell, and he starts programming the PLC. That won't change. The only difference is the PLC doesn't have a physical hardware instance in that automation cell anymore. But other than not being able to touch it, it still works the same way. So we made sure to kind of keep these changes to the people, to maintenance people, minimal. And first thing. Secondly, involve them into that project as early as possible. Get the graybacks of automation and maintenance into that project, and they'll tell you, we did this in the 80s and it didn't work, and we are sure it's not working today. And convince them to, hey, this is doable. and you yourself are going to have a positive impact if we work through all the kinks and flaws that's going to have at the beginning. And if they see a benefit for their job, then they buy into that. Then they are, and it's people management, it's transformation. They buy into this idea and they're eager to learn how to operate it the new way because it's much cooler than the old way was. And so this is how we gradually managed to get people on board. We had the lucky thing that our Böllinger Höfe plant, which is only producing these 30 cars a day, they view themselves as kind of like a real-world laboratory for new technologies. They say, we build the greatest cars here. They were building the R8. Unfortunately, we stopped building that. They're building the e-tron GT. We're building great cars here, and we want to build it with the newest technologies. So come here. We're open to new things and try it out. And so we had this really cool plant on which to try out new things. First running in parallel, the way you do it so you don't disrupt anything, but then gradually shifting over into the new way of thinking and the new way of working. And now the maintenance personnel out of that plant tells the maintenance colleagues in the other plants, wow, this is so cool now. I can do this and that much better than in the old way. And that leads to the maintenance people of the other plants saying, hey, I want that too. Can I be next? And so this is the transformation we managed to pull off and get it in there. A project like that would have never worked against maintenance personnel, against the automation people, because if they wouldn't have helped ironing out those kinks, we would have been stuck at some point, and the decision would have been made, yeah, okay, these nerds in the P-Lab, it was an idea that sounded good, but it's not going to work.
So Whit, maybe you could share some of your experience on this and ExxonMobil, especially with the Lighthouse project, because the other things that you did were kind of not critical. You weren't. I would say they're not critical, but they weren't production units. And when you transition to a production unit, you need a real support plan. Can you tell us kind of your experience there?
Yeah. So I guess similar.
By the way, I think your guy took a call during this. Okay.
Coffee. Okay, you got coffee.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
Goodness.
Sorry.
So, yeah. So, we engaged the site early on, and the resources that were going to be part of this, I think we made them part of this whole endeavor. Right. This is not a normal, DCS replacement project. So there were elements of it that were very project-like, but there were elements of it where there was still some R&D going on at the same time. So it was a little bit different, right? And so engaging the team early on to kind of get through those periods of time, to make them part of that, to get the buy-in, to learn about it as we're going, giving them opportunities to go to the lab, to kind of kick the tires, to understand how it's supposed to work. I think that's all obviously critical parts, because once the system is in place and running, you're really counting on that support on the ground to help support it on the system side and on the application side. And so there are key resources identified that have been part of the team from early on, and I think they're all advocates. I've heard really positive things. Tito, who's sitting right here, was telling me about there's some really cool things about the system that he really likes. Coming from some of the incumbent suppliers, when we've had to make software changes to the system, you undergo what's called an on-process migration. And in large systems, that can take months to prepare for and weeks to execute. And during the week or weeks that you're in this in-between time, migrating the software from the old to the new while running the plant, it's very nerve-wracking. And so he was telling me, well, we're using Ansible and everything's containerized, and so when we do a software deploy, it's just hit the button and it just goes, right? And that's amazing. And that and I've seen that. I've seen it in the lab where, you know, we've deployed new controllers and new applications, and it is just type a couple of lines in Ansible and walk away, and it's done. That's amazing to me. Again, as someone who used to do this type of thing for a living, to see what it could be now, it's totally transformative. So again, I think just like my friend here was saying, like once you start getting some of those success stories, those anecdotes, and the word starts spreading, you start turning folks that were originally, I don't want anything to do with that, to, oh, yeah, that's cool. When can we get one too? So we're on that journey now, but we're early on, right? We're only like a couple of months in on the new system. And so we're learning, but it's sounding pretty good so far.
Good.
Yeah,
I think we have time for maybe one more question. If there
just
is
one more thing
Oh,
to
what,
the support.
Mark? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
And just from the supplier side, it's not just you as the end users who need to train the support personnel. It's also the suppliers that all of a sudden provide pieces of that virtualized environment, because we as a classic software PLC manufacturer, we were historically dealing with controls engineer in the field who is hands-on with a device, and all of a sudden we got to learn about, or our support team needs to learn about, how to manage a container. Or what can go wrong. There's a different procedure for troubleshooting there. And like you said, it's building the excitement from, oh, this is a new technology, let's play with it. Let's build something in our lab, how that works. And then, oh yeah, I was able to help this person. Here are some examples. And then you get the buy-in from the support team to actually apply this new technology and help customers.
Okay, I think we're about out of time. I'd like to do a couple more questions, but I don't think we have time. I'd very much like to thank you all for coming. To have people of your experience and caliber here is really an honor for ARC, and appreciate you all coming. And let us give this panel a round of applause.